In an interim ruling, the International Criminal Court demands that Israel contains the death and damage its military offensive has caused.
In Gaza, some people are so hungry they've resorted to eating animal fodder. The UN says it's having difficulty getting food aid in.
Thousands of Palestinians fled Khan Yunis Thursday toward the town of Rafah as the fighting between Hamas and the Israeli army continues to intensify in southern Gaza. The United Nations says it cannot verify the circumstances of the crash of the Russian aircraft as Kyiv and Moscow conduct separate investigations.
The International Criminal Court has made its interim ruling on the Israel-Hamas war. The UN's top court stopped short of ordering a ceasefire in Gaza, but it demanded that Israel try to contain the death and damage its military offensive had caused.
And punishment of the crime of genocide in the Gaza Strip. South Africa versus Israel.
South Africa brought the case and had asked the court to order Israel to halt its operation.
Yeah, Nick, I think it was an interesting ruling.
Friday's decision is only an interim one. It could take a few years for the final ruling to be made on what is one of the world's longest-running conflicts.
In Gaza City in the north, some people are so hungry they've resorted to eating animal fodder. The UN says it's having difficulty getting food aid to the north due to Israel's restrictions and the fighting. According to the UN, a quarter of Gaza's population, 2.3 million people, are starving. Uday Samir can't remember the exact day when the flour ran out.
احنا اليوم 109 في الحرب. يمكن آخر مرة بتذكر أكلت طحين أبيض. يمكن أول أسبوع ثاني أسبوع في الحرب.
Hundreds of thousands of people remain in the north, even though most Gazans have fled to the south as Israel instructed. But on Friday, Israeli military ordered residents of 3 neighborhoods in Khan Yunis in the south to also evacuate. The fighting has created a humanitarian catastrophe that has spread across the enclave.
Thousands of Palestinians fled Khan Yunis Thursday toward the town of Rafah as the fighting between Hamas and the Israeli army continues to intensify in southern Gaza. For weeks, Khan Yunis has been one of the front lines of the war between Israeli forces and Hamas's militants, a conflict now entering its 4th month. On Wednesday, the Israeli army ordered Palestinians to evacuate western areas of Khan Yunis, the day after it said its forces had completely encircled the city. The UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency reported on Thursday that at least 12 people were killed and 75 injured when Israeli tanks struck a UN facility located in Khan Yunis. The court in The Hague will issue a decision Friday on South Africa's request for interim orders in a genocide case against Israel, which includes Israel halting its offensive in Gaza. Footage released by the Palestinian news agency Wafa has shown people searching for survivors through the rubble in Nusayrat refugee camp after several buildings were demolished by the latest IDF strikes. The IDF has announced that the Israeli military is expanding its operations both in central Gaza, where Nusayrat is located, and in the south of the enclave. Supporters and relatives of hostages held in Gaza staged a protest in Tel Aviv on Thursday, calling for a deal for their release. The protest took place outside the Israel's military headquarters as the war cabinet was convening. The Russian Investigative Committee on Thursday released footage that shows the site in which the Russian plane crashed. The video description says the first results of the investigation conclude the aircraft was attacked by anti-aircraft missile from the territory of Ukraine. Both Ukraine and Russia are conducting separate investigations into the downing of the Russian aircraft. According to Moscow, the plane was carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war, 6 Russian crew members, and 3 Russian military personnel. According to Kyiv, the plane may have been carrying missiles for the Russian Federation military system.
We understand both Russia and Ukraine are conducting separate investigations into the incident, and Ukraine has called for an international probe. The United Nations is not in a position to verify these reports or the circumstances of the crash.
A residential building was damaged in Odessa following Russia's second drone strike in the week in the region. According to regional officials, the attack wounded several people and caused material damage. Ukraine's air defense said the drones attacked Odessa in 2 separate waves. 11 of the 14 drones launched were downed.
The UN has appealed for urgent humanitarian assistance for Ukraine. The call was made by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, following a week-long visit to the country, where he visited several areas affected by the war, such as this town attacked by drones a few weeks ago. This couple was at home when the attack occurred. Their house was destroyed.
Да, окна. У нас ни окон, ни дверей, не было ничего. Одежда у нас, кровать засыпана была.
Also they provide us NFIs, new mattresses, bed lining.
UNHCR was able to immediately help the family by assisting them in putting glasses in windows, for example. It's very, very cold here in Ukraine in winter, but also helping them with fixing the ceilings and cleaning up the rubble, all the things that people have to do immediately in order to be able to continue to live.
The United Nations and its partners have requested about 3.8 billion euros from the international community to cover the cost of aid operations in Ukraine this year. This will help almost 11 million people directly or indirectly affected by the military aggression launched by Russia almost 2 years ago. But this aid is 26% lower than in 2023. Thousands of people have been queuing across Russia for days now to give their support to Boris Nadezhdin in his bid to become Russian president in the election on March the 17th. Nadezhdin is the only candidate who openly speaks out against Russia's actions in Ukraine.
Я за любого, если сейчас, знаете, извиняюсь, за черта лысого готов голосовать, но чтобы что-то сменилось. Хотя я понимаю, что это бесполезно, но...
Потому что вот я мать, у меня 3 детей, и война это ужасно, ужасно. Очень нужно прекратить это просто как можно скорее.
Так сообщил, что собрали уже 100 тысяч, и сбор активно продолжается. Первый вопрос в связи с этим, насколько Кремль рассматривает Надеждина как серьезного соперника Путину на предстоящих президентских выборах? Видит ли угрозу?
Нисколько. Мы не рассматриваем его как соперника.
Nadezhdin recently met with soldiers' wives who were demanding that their reservist husbands, who went into service in autumn 2022, are replaced with contract soldiers. Another presidential hopeful, Ekaterina Densova, has lost her appeal against authorities' refusal to register her for the race. She campaigned on a vision of a humane, cooperative Russia. Behind bars in penal colonies or in self-exile abroad, Russian opposition figures vow they will still put up a fight against President Putin as he seeks yet another term in office, although they believe he will be declared the winner, no matter how the votes are cast.
Thousands have taken to the streets of Bratislava after Slovakia's populist government said it would shut down the Special Prosecutor's Office. It handles serious crimes such as graft, organised crime and extremism, and those cases would be taken over by prosecutors in regional offices, which haven't dealt with those types of crimes for 20 years. The EU has also opposed Prime Minister Robert Fico's proposal. The European Parliament has questioned Slovakia's ability to fight corruption if the changes are adopted.
A 6-day strike called by the train drivers' union is jeopardizing much of Germany's rail traffic, starting on Wednesday. Most cross-border services have been cancelled, but as far as the Swiss section is concerned, alternatives have been provided.
Es wird wahrscheinlich der Gewerkschaft jetzt nicht so passen, ne, dass es jetzt hier eine Alternative gibt, aber für mich ist es natürlich sehr gut. Und er fährt auch sehr zuverlässig, muss man sagen. Immer pünktlich.
According to the state-owned railway operator Deutsche Bahn, around 80% of long-distance trains have been cancelled. Among other things, union demands a reduction from 38 to 35 hours a week, with no reduction in salary.
Jannik Sinner has managed to knock out Novak Djokovic in the semi-finals of the Australian Open. But the world number one, who is now 36 years old, responded by saying this does not mean it's the beginning of the end. It was the 22-year-old Italian's third win over Djokovic in their last 4 matches. The victory confirms Jannik Sinner's place at the Open in what will be his first Grand Slam final. He'll now have to wait to find out who his opponent will be.
A sea of Indigenous flags and tens of thousands of demonstrators rallying on the streets of Melbourne against Australia Day celebrations. The 26th of January marks the anniversary of British colonialism, but for many First Nations Australians, it's a day of mourning. Protesters once again called for the name of the national holiday to be changed to Invasion Day. Major sports have stopped calling the holiday Australia Day, and the Australian Football League Players Association, amongst others, has called for the date to change.